Welcome to the Deseret Audio Library. On this cassette, you'll hear popular speaker and author Brad Wilcox and a live recording of a talk entitled Changing the World, One Lunch Period at a Time. And now, Brad Wilcox.
Brothers and sisters, welcome. It's nice to be able to be with you this evening. I have seen so many good friends, some that I haven't seen for many years, some that I haven't seen since before their missions, and I'm so grateful to see you again. Thanks for coming. It's nice for me to be able to be here tonight, and I also want to introduce you to my date tonight, and that's my daughter, Wendy. She's my oldest daughter, and she's my girlfriend, and she was glad to hear that some of these young men are available. When she was in second grade, I asked her what her favorite part of school was, and she said, recess. And I said, why? What do you do at recess? And she said, chase the boys. And I said, Wendy, what do you do when you catch the boys? And she said, we take them to jail. And I said, what do you do with them when they're in jail? And she said, we hug them. And I said, Wendy, knock it off. Just stop it, because the boys don't even like it, so just knock it off. And she says, Daddy, they say they don't like it, but they do. I love her and all my children so much. Tonight, I want to read you a book that was written by my son when he was in second grade. It's called Secret Agent by Russell T. Wilcox. Dad made us read a story in The Friend. Mom had a great idea. We had to earn $10 to give to the poor. We didn't want to at first, but Dad said if we complained, we had to earn 20. We didn't complain. To earn money, we did chores. I had to clean the bathroom and mop the floor and sweep the garage. I saved my money in my crayon bank. We saved for about 2 or 1 months. We finally had enough money. We went to a lady's house. She has 5 kids and no dad. She is poor. P-O-R-E. She is poor. We knocked on her door and ran away. It was fun. Dad says I was a secret agent for God. I think like my son, when I say the word service, most of you probably think of service projects. And service projects are the things we do on Wednesday night when they don't tell you what you're going to do. And they just say, come on Wednesday, we're going to have a real fun time. And so you show up at the church on Wednesday and there's all these trucks with bushel baskets and rakes and shovels, and all your leaders are going, get in the trucks. We're going to have a real fun time. And you end up at some lady's house and you're hoeing the garden and you're painting the house and you're pulling weeds, and all your leaders are running around going, aren't you having fun? And that's what I always thought of when I thought about service. And service projects are important. It's a valuable part of growing up in the church and learning our responsibilities to keep our baptismal covenants. It's important. It's a vital part of being a Latter-day Saint. But that's not the kind of service I want to talk to you about tonight. Tonight I want to talk to you about a different kind of service. I want to talk to you about the kind of service that is taught to us in the Doctrine and Covenants, section 81, where it says, wherefore be faithful, stand in the office under which I have appointed you, succor the weak, Lift up the hands that hang down. Strengthen feeble knees. That's the kind of service that I want to focus on tonight. Succor the weak. Lift up the hands that hang down. Strengthen feeble knees. I always hated girls' choice dances. I hated them. I always hated them because that's when the boys are in the position that the girls are usually in, wondering whether somebody's going to ask you to the dance. And you get nervous because all my friends start getting asked to the dance, and I didn't get asked, and it's embarrassing, man. All your friends are going, I'm going with so-and-so, I'm going with so-and-so, so who are you going with? And then you just say, oh, my ward has a service project that night, and I'm not going to be able to go. And it's embarrassing. All my friends are getting asked, and I'm not getting asked. I mean, the dance is on Friday. The week is going on. I'm not getting asked. I mean, ladies, are you blind? I mean, I could not believe that nobody was asking me. And I was worried about it. And I was going from my early morning seminary class over to the school. And I was walking with my friend, Steve Perry. And we're walking into the back of B Wing in my school. And I said, Steve, how come nobody's asking me to this dance? And he's like, check your deodorant. And we're walking in the back of B Wing. And just as we walk in the door, there's a piece of toilet paper hanging down from the ceiling of the school. And on the toilet paper there was a sign, and it said, Brad Wilcox, grab hold. And I looked at Steve, and he looked at me. He says, well, grab hold. So I grabbed hold, and the toilet paper was stretched clear down the hall. And so I started rolling the toilet paper up on my arm, and people are coming to school. They're looking at me like, and I'm smiling, hi, hi, hi. I'm rolling this toilet paper on my arm. I go clear down B Wing, turn down main hall, and the toilet paper ends in the library. And it ends inside of a book. And the book is called Night of Passion. I was so excited. I opened up that book, and there was my invitation to the Girls' Choice dance. It said, will you go to the dance with me? Signed, the Volman. Not woman, the Volman. Oh, I was so excited. I got to my first period class, and the assistant principal gets on the intercom, and he says to the whole school, and we would like everyone to know that Brad Wilcox has been asked to the Girls' Choice dance. And this is over the whole school. Everybody in my class is going, yay! And he says, by the woman. Oh, man, I could not get away from it. I walked down the hall, and everybody's going, the woman, the woman. Everywhere I went, and this girl did it right. I mean, I did not come to school that my locker wasn't decorated. I mean, crepe paper, balloons, posters, and cookies. Plates of cookies. Ladies, that is the key. And they always had signs, the Volman, the Volman, the Volman. Well, it got to be Friday, and I didn't know who the Volman was. And I started getting nervous, because all of a sudden I thought, I'll bet this is Steve. I'll bet this is my friend doing this to me. And I'll bet you anything he's done this whole thing to make me feel stupid. And Steve comes around the corner, and I'm just like ready to cram his head in the locker. And he says, oh, I brought this note from the Volman. And I'm thinking, oh, sure. And I open it up, and it says, if you want to meet me, come to the English room after school. So I go to the English room right after school. I get myself all ready. I walk into the room, and the whole room is crammed with girls. Just crammed. They're having this big last-minute meeting. This girl's going, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of this, you're bringing this, you're bringing that. She looks over at me, and she says, Brad, so what do you want? I mean, what am I supposed to say? Excuse me, but would the real Volman please stand up here? I didn't know what to say, so I said, well, I'm supposed to take down this bulletin board. This is true. I started taking down the bulletin board. I mean, the poor teacher's going to come to school and just have a coronary. Bulletin board's down. So I'm taking down the bulletin board and I'm thinking, surely they'll leave in a minute. I mean, they got to get out of here so that the Bowman can come. And I mean, I got the whole bulletin board off. I'm working on the butcher paper on the back of this bulletin board. And all of a sudden their meeting ends and they start trickling off just a few at a time. Now, I do not know what it is about girls and groups. I just have no clue. Even in the 6th grade that I used to teach, one girl would raise her hand and say, Mr. Wilcox, may I go to the bathroom? I'd say, yes. And 9 girls would stand up and walk out of the room. It's like they always have to be together. And here I am, they're trickling off just a group at a time, and finally there's just this one group in the center of the room talking. And I'm thinking, get out of here so that the woman can come. And they start trickling off, just a few at a time, few at a time. Finally there's just one girl left, and I'm thinking, sister, get out of here so that the woman can come. And all of a sudden it hit me. And I turned around and I looked at her and I said, the woman? And she said, Now, I call this young woman Kim. That wasn't her name, but that's what I've called her through the years. And I need to tell you a little bit about what she was like. And I think the best way to let you know what Kim was like is to tell you what she was not like. Because she was not like you. And she was not like you. And she was not like you. And this girl's going, this is going to be a long fight. She's not like you, and she's not like you, and she's not... See, she wasn't pretty, and she wasn't popular, and she wasn't skinny, and she wasn't a lot of things. And there I was, and there she was, and I thought to myself, oh, why me? Why did she choose me? There are 1 million boys in this school. I have counted them myself. 1 million. And why did she choose me? I wasn't Mr. Popular. I wasn't the student body president. I wasn't quarterback on the football team. I was just Brad Wilcox who ran around rolling toilet paper up on his arm. I mean, I thought, why did she choose me? I thought, man, I'm kind of struggling for my own social status here. I'm kind of struggling for my own place. If I go to the dance with her, then that's just going to like shoot me down. And I thought, oh no. But I didn't say that. I just said, oh, Kim, this has been real fun. This week has been real fun. She said it wasn't me. She said it was my friends. They did it. It was their idea, and they did the whole thing, and I didn't do any of it. And she looked up at me and she said, look, you don't have to go if you don't want to. I have no idea why we always give other people so much power in our lives. We have power in the lives of those around us. This young lady had given me every bit of self-esteem that she had mustered since she was in 6th grade. She gave it to me. I had it all. I could do anything I wanted. I could smash it. I could stomp on it. I could throw it out the window. I could spit on it. I could build it. I could do anything. It's not even right, but we have power in other people's lives. Stand in the office under which I have appointed you. Right then, it was like I was on a mission, man. I was in the high school English room mission. I didn't have a letter from the prophet. I didn't have a companion. I didn't even have a white shirt. But I had a mission. Succor the weak. Lift up the hands that hang down. Strengthen feeble knees. I knew what I had to do. And I said, Kim, I will pick you up tonight at 6 o'clock. And she said, I can't go. And I thought, what do you mean you can't go? I am having a spiritual experience here. I mean, it never happens like that in the new era. Never. Never. I said, you're the one who invited me. She said, yeah, but I was so sure when you found out who it was who invited you to this dance that you would say no and make up some big excuse. She says, I don't even have anything to wear. I said, Kim, you find something to wear. But we are going to this dance. And we went, and marvelous things started to happen. Miracles started to happen right before my eyes as I started seeing a transformation begin. As people started to look at Kim and see something more than what they had cruelly categorized her to be clear back in elementary school. As people started looking at her and starting to see something different, miracles started to happen. I mean, we used to stand in Main Hall. Oh, I don't know whether you do this anymore, but all the guys would stand in Main Hall and they would grade the girls. Going down the hall, they would call out numbers. The poor girls would walk down the hall and it was like an Olympic competition. And all the boys would stand in the hall and say, 8, 8, 9, 9, 10. And they'd call out numbers. And Kim would walk down the hall and everybody would say, -3, -3. And I said, And they said, 0, 0. And I said, And they said, 2, 2. And I said, And they said, 5, 5, 5. And I said, And they said, And I said, And they said, 9, 9. And they'd say it the whole way she walked down the hall. And young people, you treat someone like a -3, and they will be a -3. But you treat someone like a 9, and just as sure as Johnny Lingo and the 8-cow wife, they're going to be a 9. Miracles started to happen. But I tell you, the reason I tell you that whole story is not because of the miracle that happened in Kim's life, but because of the miracle that happened in my life. The day I decided I was going to care more about somebody else than I was going to care about myself. The day I decided I was going to care about somebody else's feelings and somebody else's popularity a little bit more than I was going to care about my own. The miracle happened when Brad Wilcox decided he was going to care more about whether she went to the dance than I cared about whether I got asked to the dance. And that's the miracle that happened. I love the poem that says, I tried to find myself I could not see. I tried to find my God, but he eluded me. I tried to find my brother, and then I found all three. The true miracle of reaching out to others in a Christ-like way is what happens inside of us as we change, as we grow, as we put ourselves on channel 2 instead of channel 1. That's what my friend Barbara Jones says. She says, we spend our whole life on channel 1. Channel 1, my problems, my complexion, my lack of boyfriends, my grades, my problems with my parents, my situation. She says, man, change channels. Turn to channel 2. What happens in a TV when you change channels? It doesn't erase what's going on the other channels. It simply puts them in the background. And as you change channels, as you switch to channel 2, it won't erase your problems or your concerns, but it will put them in perspective behind the concerns of others who take center stage on your screen. That doesn't take much. I'm not talking about making a big deal out of it. I'm not talking about organizing something. I'm not talking about having planning meetings. I'm just talking about doing the small things that make a big difference. I talked to a group of young people one time who were getting ready to go do a service project at a rest home. They were going to go and brighten the lives of a lot of elderly women and a lot of elderly men. But as I spoke to them just before their service project, I reminded them that when Christ was on the earth, most of the miracles that he performed and most of the healings that he did were all while he was on the way to somewhere else. I told those young people that perhaps the uplift that they give to an elderly woman in a rest home might be equally matched by the uplift they give a friend or a new kid who just moved in, riding in the van next to them on the way to the service project. That's what I want you to realize. These are the kind of things that you can do everywhere. Lifting up the hands that hang down, strengthening feeble knees, succoring the weak, looking around you at those who may need a smile or an acknowledgement of any kind that just says, hey, I know you're there. It doesn't take much. I remember being in Texas one summer, and a bishop approached me just before we boarded the plane, and he said, Brother Wilcox, would you please take this letter to a missionary from our ward who's in the MTC? He's struggling and he wants to come home. Would you please take this letter to him and tell him he can't come home from his mission? Wow, that's quite a scary responsibility. So I took the letter from the bishop and I said, I'll try my very best to meet with him and do whatever I can. At the time, the mission president at the MTC was a wonderful man named George Durant. And I went to Brother Durant's office and I explained the situation, and he said, I wasn't even aware of it. He said, thanks so much for bringing this to my attention. He said, we're very concerned. He said, please, I'll set you up in an office down the hall. Please talk to this young man and his companion and see if you can do any good. Oh man, I thought and thought about everything I could say. And when that kid walked in that office, I just unloaded both barrels. I started telling him about how a call from the prophet was a call from the prophet and how he owed it to be an example for all the young people in his ward who were looking up to him. And if he didn't go on a mission, then he was going to be responsible for all the souls that he could have saved if he went. And I started telling him about how it was a foundation for his life. And if he didn't go, then he'd be building on a shaky foundation. And I said everything that I could even think of saying. And he just sat there with a huge wall built around him. And he did not listen to one word of my marvelous sermon. He didn't listen to a word. And we walked out of the office. And just then, Brother Durant was coming out of his office. And I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity. Maybe I can introduce this missionary to President Durant. So I said, President Durant, just a minute, please. He stopped and I said, I want to introduce you to this missionary. And as we got closer, President Durant looked at the elder and he said, oh, I don't need to be introduced to you. I know you. You stand out. He said, I have noticed you. All the missionaries here at the MTC, you stand out. I have noticed you. And he called him by name. This missionary was going, really? And President Durant grabbed his shoulder and he grabbed his arm and he shook him a little bit and he said, oh, Brad. He said, look at the eyes on this missionary. He said, you have the eyes for missionary work. And this poor little elder said, really? And I'm thinking, go for it, George. Go for it. Just fill him up and just say all those things and do it because you're breaking through the wall, so keep it up. And I'm sitting there thinking, go for it, go for it. And then Brother Durant turned to me and he said, you know, Brad, someday, this missionary just might be as cool as you and me. And he turned around and he walked away. And I thought to myself, cool. He called me cool. Cool. And then I'm thinking, no way. How did he do that? How did he? Now he can sucker in a couple of greenie missionaries. He can do it to them, but how did he do it to me? I'm a grown man. I teach primary. How did he do it to me? And then I thought about it, and I realized that it didn't take all that much. It didn't take a lecture. It didn't take a sermon. It didn't take scripture references and quotes from the brethren. It took One person who called him by name. It took one person who grabbed him and kind of held him for a minute. It took one person who made eye contact with him and gave him a compliment. Yes, the missionary stayed on his mission. And Brad Wilcox walked out of the MTC a much wiser man, because I realized that I had gone about it the wrong way. He broke through that wall because he cared. He just cared. Sincerely and warmly, he cared about someone else. And that was all it took. And I know you're thinking, oh yeah, that sounds corny, man. I'm not going to go running around going, oh, what a lovely dress you have on. Oh, I love your sweater. Oh, you have the eyes for missionary work. And I know you're thinking, oh, that is corny. People eat corn. And growing spirits need that nourishment. So even though it may seem corny, you muster all the sincerity in your heart and you look for the things that you can find to build those around you. That's all it takes. Just an acknowledgement that somebody's there.
This is the end of Side 1. Please continue listening on Side 2.
One time I had the chance to attend a youth conference, and I was in the state of Arkansas. And young people had come from all over the state to attend this youth conference. And we were standing there in a cultural hall. And I was standing there, and all the kids were coming in, and they were all looking nervous. And they were looking around like some of you may have been tonight. They're looking around like, God, I don't even know anybody. What am I doing here? I can't believe it. This is so lame. Man, I can't believe my mom forced me to come. And they're all looking around feeling nervous and out of place. And I noticed one man in particular because he was standing right by the back door just looking like he was going to bolt at any moment. And I noticed him because he was very unique. He did not have arms. He had full-grown hands on the end of his shoulders that functioned perfectly. But he had no arms. And I looked over at him, and everybody's walking by this kid like he was not even there. Everybody's walking by like, hey, my mom told me not to look at these kind of people, and I'm not going to stare. And they walked right by him. The opposite of love is not hate, although that may be the first word that comes to our minds. The real opposite of love is indifference. That is the cold, the cruel, satanic opposite of love. And these young people are walking by this boy like he does not exist. Even hate recognizes someone's existence, but indifference doesn't. And I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to get this young man involved in this youth conference? And just then I looked over and there was another kid and he was standing around looking kind of lost. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. So I brought him up to the front by the stage and I brought the other boy up to the front by the stage and I held them about this close to each other and I said, now you be friends. They said, okay. And they became friends. And that's all it took. The whole conference. Just somebody to stand by in a line so that you didn't have to feel stupid. Somebody that would listen to you if you tried to tell a joke and just hang around with you. That was all it took. Those two stuck together the whole youth conference. They had a blast. The final night came. You've all been to youth conferences. They're having a big dance. The music's blaring. I'm moving around like the Brady Bunch. I'm dancing and all of a sudden I just feel these eyes staring at me. And I didn't hear anything. I just felt like somebody was staring at me. You know how when you're driving on the road and you stop at the intersection and you're singing along with the radio, and then all of a sudden you just look over and everybody in the car next to you is like, oh man, I just felt these eyes looking at me. And so I turned completely around and here was this little boy with no arms. And he's standing there in the middle of the dance. And the music's going and everybody's dancing and he's just standing there. And I said, yes? And he said, Brother Wilcox, this is my friend and I. Now you catch that word. My friend and I, we want to invite you to our pizza party. You know how youth conferences are. Everybody has a pizza party. He says, we want to invite you to our pizza party. I said, you bet, buddy. I'm so honored that you'd invite me. I'd be happy to come. He's all excited. He runs off with his little friend, and I'm out there dancing, and all of a sudden about 5 minutes later, I just feel these eyes staring at me, and I turn around, and here's this kid again, and he says, Brother Wilcox, he says, we need $quarter to go and phone and order the pizza. I said, okay. I said, you know where my briefcase is. Now go get my briefcase and pull out $quarter and go and phone and order the pizza. And so he's all excited and he runs off with his friend, and about a half hour later I'm out there dancing, and all of a sudden I feel these eyes just staring at me. And I turned around and here's this little boy again, and he said, Brother Wilcox, we need $13 to pay for the pizza. And I'm thinking, oh, some pizza party. This kid invites me to his pizza party and I'm buying the pizza. I said, let me invite you to my pizza party. I said, you bet. I said, you know where my briefcase is? I said, hurry over there, grab my wallet, pull out $13 and go pay for the pizza. Now hurry. But he didn't move. He just stood there. The music was blaring. People are dancing all around us. And this boy just stood there and tears just started pouring down his face. And he said, really? Really? Oh, man, I just grabbed him. I said, you are worth so much more than $13 to me. And he says, oh, God, I wish I'd have known. I'd ordered pepperoni. I told that story at a youth conference in Indiana, and these kids came up after and they said, Brother Wilcox, we want to invite you to our steak and lobster barn. I thought, oh man, this is getting expensive. Young people, we are worth so much more than we let ourselves believe. And it's time to start treating those around you, even those that you do not know, even those that you think you have not met yet. It's time to start lifting up the hands that hang down, strengthening feeble knees, succoring the weak. It's time to reach out and let the scriptures on service really mean something. I was in another youth conference in Texas, and I met the stake president, and I said, oh, I'm so impressed with this particular young man. And the stake president said, you should be. He said, let me tell you a little bit about this boy. He said he's one of the only members of the church in his whole high school of over 4,000 students. He said he's the student body president in his school. He said, let me tell you what this kid did. See, he decided that he would stop listening to the scriptures in seminary about when ye are in the service of your fellow men, you're only in the service of your God. He decided he'd stop memorizing those scriptures and he would start living them. As a senior in high school, he looked around and tried to see the young people in his school who needed a hand, and he found them. Whole table full of young people in the lunchroom that were a little slower, had a hard time, right down at the very bottom of the pecking order. And he saw them. And every day they'd come in and they'd eat their lunch at the table and they'd bring a sack lunch from home. Now, I don't know what your schools were like, but in my school you could either eat lunch at school or eat lunch off campus. But in his school you couldn't. You had to eat on campus or bring a lunch from home. And this boy looked around and started noticing that all of the slow kids, all of the kids that were really challenged were the ones that were bringing their lunches from home. Everybody else was eating at the school. And so he decided he'd do something. He decided he'd make a difference. He decided all on his own. The bishop didn't pull him together and say, now we really need to start loving other people like we'd love Jesus if he were there. And no, nobody pulled him together and planned a service project. He just went out that night and he bought a He-Man lunchbox. And he filled it with food. And he took it to school the next day. Now this is high school. All of his friends are looking at him like, He-Man? And he didn't say a word. He just carried his lunchbox around. He'd sit down in class, put his lunchbox up on the desk. All of his teachers are looking at him like, He-Man? And he didn't say a word. He just smiled and carried his lunchbox and went into the lunchroom. And instead of sitting by all his cool friends, instead of sitting by all the popular friends, he went and sat at the table with some of these other young people. And now they're slow, but they're not that slow. And they're looking at him like, He-Man? And he didn't say a word. He just opened his lunchbox and starts eating his food. Now all of a sudden his buddies start catching on. Oh, I get it. Oh, this is good. Oh, he's like making fun of these kids. Oh, this is good. He planned this out, man. Oh, this is awesome. And they picked up their lunches and they went over to the table and they started pushing and they started shoving and they started belittling and they started swearing just like they had since elementary school. And this young student body president stood up and he said, get out of here. He said, this is the cold lunch table. You want to eat a lunch at this table, you bring it from home. Now get out of here. I am a school teacher. I know what it means to commit social suicide. I know what that is. And I would have believed that that young man did it. He just told the social elite of the school to get out of there. But young people, when you stand for the right, things have a way of working out. Things have a way of working together for good. And that's exactly what happened to this young man. Because the next day, instead of being ostracized by his friends, young people started bringing lunch boxes to school. The next day, lunch boxes. People were bringing like the Jetsons, Smurfs, Casper the Friendly Ghost. It got to the point that the school lunch ladies had to come to him and say, knock it off. Because nobody's eating lunch anymore. The whole school was bringing lunches in lunch boxes from home. Because one Mormon kid, just like you, decided he was going to make a difference. And he was going to reach out. And he was going to serve. Let me read you something that was written by a dear sister. Her name is Chieko Okazaki. She says, some service is quiet service, simple service. Other service is spectacular. Esther's service was very spectacular. She saved a whole people from genocide. Possibly none of us will ever be in a dramatic situation that is even remotely similar. Our opportunities to serve come one at a time, person by person. I hope that in addition to the projects where we work in mass to accomplish great purposes, there are also quiet personal projects where we see the face of the person we are serving and where in our own eyes, smiling back at them, they can see the love of the Savior. I'd just like to share one last story with you, because this is a story of when I felt the impact of someone's concern for the individual. It was before my mission, and it was when I had the opportunity to meet President Spencer W. Kimball. I was in a play at the time called My Turn on Earth. How many of you remember that play? How many of you remember Satan? That was me. And we were performing in the Salt Palace at that time, and we got a letter telling us that President Kimball would be coming to the play with some members of his family for family night. Now, a lot of families came to that play for family night, but this one had me a little taken aback. I was a little nervous. The whole weekend before that performance, I was on pins and needles. At the time I was teaching the 12-year-olds in Sunday school. And I said to the little 12-year-olds in my class, I said, what would you say if you had the chance to meet a prophet of God face to face? And the one kid said, I'd ask them if they have to wear makeup during general conference. And the other kid wanted to know if President Kimball knew how to water ski, because he had a boat down at Lake Powell and he wanted to invite him to go with the family. And I had about given up on all these little kids until a little Lamanite girl in my class named Carrie said, well, that's easy. If I met President Kimball, I would just tell him that I love him. So the next night, I performed in front of President Kimball. I was Satan in front of the prophet. I mean, what if he told me I did a good job? I mean, I was really nervous. I was really nervous. And afterwards, the cast, and if you remember the play, it only has 5 people in it. And so our meeting was pretty intimate. And we were led to a room, still in our costumes, where we were able to meet President Kimball and some members of his family. Our director was walking President Kimball by the arm as he came down the line and introducing them to each cast member. As he got to me, the director decided that he'd let President Kimball know that I had put in my mission papers. So he said, this is Elder Wilcox. And he explained that I had put in my mission papers and I was awaiting my mission call. And President Kimball said, oh, Elder Wilcox, where are you going on your mission? And I said, I don't know. I thought you knew. The director's just going, oh. And President Kimball just laughed and laughed and laughed. And he said, what are you doing in the church right now? And I said, I teach the 12-year-olds in Sunday school. And he said, there's no more important calling in the church. What did you teach them yesterday? And I couldn't remember. All I remembered is that I had asked them what they would say if they had the chance to meet the prophet face to face. So I said, President Kimball, I asked them what they would say if they had the chance to meet you face to face. And he said, and what did they tell you? And I said, President Kimball, they told me that they would tell you that they love you. I love you. And then he reached his arms up to me. And he pulled me down. And he held me. He did not just hug me. He held me. And I will never forget the feelings that I had as that very special man succored the weak and lifted up the arms that hang down and strengthened my feeble knees. When my mission call came, I did not wonder if that was where I was supposed to be, because right at the bottom of that call was a signature of a man who had held me in his arms. I don't share that story often, but I did on one occasion. And a very bold teenage boy came up to me and he said, of course he's going to do that. He's the prophet. It's easy for him. He's the prophet. I mean, it's like expected. He's the prophet. He's going to do that because he's the prophet. And I just said to the young man, is he Christ-like because he is a prophet? Or is he a prophet because he is so very Christ-like? We have a lot of numbers in our church. Quorum of 12, quorum of 70. You go on a mission when you're 21 if you're a young woman. You go on a mission if you're 19 when you're a young man. We date at 16. That's a big number. That's a good number. We date when we're 16. We're baptized when we're 8. We have a lot of numbers in the church. We even send missionaries out 2 by 2. But young people, you mark my words, the most important number in this church is 1. For when we come unto Christ, it's 1 by 1. And when we turn to help others in their journey toward Christ, it's 1 by 1. Even President Hinckley reminded us recently that although every man has got to be baptized, although every woman needs that ordinance, although all people will have their temple endowment at one point in this world's history, they all still happen 1 by 1. I'll close by sharing with you something that I read on the very last page of the biography of Elder David B. Haight. It was a simple phrase that Elder Haight himself said, and something that has become somewhat of a personal motto in my life. He says, "There are so many hands to shake, and so many smiles to smile, so many eyes to look into, so many hearts to touch, that I ask, how can I go faster and more effectively serve in the kingdom?" God bless you, wonderful young people. I'm so grateful that you came tonight, and I want you to know I have a testimony of the gospel. I know the importance of the cause in which we are engaged. And even on nights when we think that nothing we do is important, we have to remember that what we do does count. And it does matter because we are in truth. This is not just another church. This is not just a nice, good church like lots of good churches. This is the true church. And that means something to us. We're not simply donating money and spending time in a righteous cause. We are spending time in the cause. We do not simply follow the beat of a different drummer like all your non-member friends might claim. We are following the drummer. And one day every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus is the Christ and that we were right all along. Even our smallest efforts toward self-betterment, even our smallest efforts toward reaching out to others are not efforts spent in vain. They're not efforts thrown out the window. What we do matters. And even our smallest efforts count because we are part of eternal truth. I leave you with my testimony that we, right here in this room, right here in this church that millions and millions and millions of people do not yet even know about. This church that thousands and thousands of people literally fight against. This church that so many take for granted and that so many don't even understand. We, right here, will change the world. I promise you that. We will change the world. And we will do it. One heart, one mind, one soul at a time. God bless you, my young friends. I love you with all my heart. I'm so proud of you. Keep up the good work, for you have so much to offer. I leave this testimony and my love and my friendship in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.